All right, thank you, uh, everyone, for joining us for this month's edition of the African Liberty webinar. My name is Ibrahim Babatunde Anoba, and I am the managing editor at African Liberty. This month, we had the pleasure of discussing one of the most recurring themes in our webinar series. I think most of the issues we've addressed in our webinar series often concern trade and economic realities on the continent. So this month we have Africa's economic future, and we are trying to weigh the key determinants, the key things that could shape the continent's economic future in the next few years. Our other two guests, Wanda Firi and Mahmoud Abouch, are unable to join us for the call today, but we are so much honored to have Max Koffi, who is the CEO of Africa in Motion, with us today. And Max Koffi is a prominent advocate for Africa's economic decolonization. He is the founder and CEO of Africa in Motion, a non-profit organization that aims to increase the impact of the African diaspora on the sustainable and economic development of the African continent. Additionally, he is the founder and chairman of the Equal Trade Alliance, which is an organization that aims to bring together European and African professionals, students, and civil society actors to reflect upon the current trade relations between Europe and Africa, as well as the challenges that arise within those relationships. Mr. Max Koffi, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here and share some good ideas with my brothers and sisters from all over Africa and in the diaspora. Hopefully, we can come together to tackle this issue, the challenges we are facing in Africa. So I'm happy to be here, and I hope we will have a very fruitful conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. So before we go into the conversation proper, I just want to encourage our audience to, as usual, drop your questions in the Q&A box. And so for the chat box is just for general interactions, but the Q&A box is where you actually drop your questions. And because, I mean, sometimes the chat box gets flooded and it's hard to figure out which one is a question or just a comment. So the Q&A for the questions and the chat box once it's up now for you to interact with other audience or listeners. So Max.
Yes.
Of course, we know why economic question is always up on the continent so much. I don't really like to emphasize the bad indicators, economic hardships or poverty and whatnot, but try to emphasize opportunities, right? So this conversation will be about opportunities that abound in the economic framework on the continent. But I want to start by thinking around the issue of the nature of Africa's trade or deals or economic relations or commercial relations with actors, as you know well, not only in Europe, which is your own area of expertise, but as we've seen with Asian countries, most of China and Russia, but also traditionally with the US and Europe. So considering all this, the fact that, as many will say, that Africa is at a point where it has so much options to pursue in terms of trade relations compared to, say, last 20 years, what do you think would be the best approach for African countries in dealing with these numerous options to make sure we get the maximum benefit out of them, so that we lead the conversation and not just we've been not just to present ourselves as having no options, but to go with the US or go with the Russians? Well, how do we navigate? Is there a framework that you guys and the commerce sector, use for advisory, or what's your general observation of that?
Yeah, the general observation, actually, this is a very good question. Thank you for asking. That is exactly what we are advocating for. Look, the situation of Africa in the world, because this is also a very important point of departure. Most African people think Africa is in one, but we are in the global world. And it's very important to think good about how do external countries, like you name Asia, America, Europe mainly, how do they look at to Africa? So that is very important to start with. And what we are advocating for, to have one holistic approach that will be presented to all these so-called trade partners. And it is what we miss in Africa. We are negotiating from a very weak position. We are in expectation. People come to us, Chinese come to us with their proposals, European come to us with their ideas, American come, now Russia is coming, but not only those, now even India, Turkey, Brazil even, they are all targeting Africa. But we African, we don't have anything to put on table when those people come. If we had that, and that's what we are advocating for, and that's what I'm going to present, we should be like, okay, you want to trade with us? Fine, no problem, but these are our conditions. And it is fundamentally important for African people to understand why are we dealing from a very weak foundation. We don't have this foundation yet. Our government are so weak that they are not able to negotiate in the right way. And what we are missing is the understanding that actually we are in power position when it's come to negotiate, because all these countries are depending on us.
Yeah, but so Max, so sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
So is it an option of we do not know how to negotiate, or we know what we should be asking in those negotiations, and we just don't want to present them because maybe the people negotiating on our behalf have some personal or ulterior motives? So which one is it? I mean, it kind of, my own opinion is that I don't think it can be the case that for all this 50, 60 years since independence, we've never had a crop of leaders who are actually smart enough to know what the continent needs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, am I wrong,
Yeah.
or think something else is in play here?
Exactly. And that is the thing, because we negotiate based on what other put on the table. That's exactly the other way around. It should be different. So one concrete example is like they are depending on our raw materials. All industries you see in the US, in Europe, in Asia, they are based mostly on, for more than 50% on African raw materials. What we are not doing is putting our one option on table. And what we are defending is like, okay, we have these raw materials. You have the industry, fine. We need a new economic model. You process our raw materials and we share the revenue made from the final products. This is something that never happened in Africa. So when our government, our intelligent people negotiate, they always negotiate on basis of what other brings. Like we are still discussing about the price of our raw materials. We should jump to the downstream side of the value chain, where big money is made from our raw materials, and ask, we want a share in these revenues. So this is a different approach.
Yeah. So I just wish, I really wish our leaders are listening. Now, so the one thing we cannot deny is that many of these people actually went to some of the best schools in the world. Some of the best, they attend some of the best international economics programs you can think of anywhere. So it's not a case of are they smart enough? So definitely there must be some selfish other priorities going on. But it seems like we have questions from early on, and I would like people to really want to drive this conversation. So we have a question from Derek Kinyua. I don't know where Derek is from. Is that from East Africa? I think yeah, from Kenya. So Derek is asking, how can African economists reduce economic inequality, particularly in light of the gap between rural and urban areas? If I may add to that, in the context of the trade question we're dealing with, in the urban centers, we've seen that it's easier for you to see the activities of Chinese investors, the activities of European corporations, right? And it's easier to actually, make sure they comply by, your set rules as a country.
Yes.
But that cases in the interior, in the very rural places where we've heard about Chinese engineers, abusing some powers, or I don't want to use the word enslaving some workers. So it seems as though the urban realities, or as Mahmoud Mamdani would call it, the bifurcatedness of these urban and rural realities is just so obvious that in the urban centers, you can monitor the activities of these investors, but in the rural area, some of these are perpetrating some of the most heinous crimes. I mean, we know about the story of Katanga in Congo and the mining and whatnot. So what do you think, you as someone who have advised corporations and, this multilateral agreements, what do you think is missing in the way we as Africans, address our realities in those two different spaces?
Yeah. What we are missing is having control on our one countries. You take Congo. The government in Congo doesn't have any idea about what's happening 500 kilometers further from Kinshasa. They don't have the infrastructure. They cannot communicate with people there. And this is a big problem. And because we are dealing from a very wrong approach, like we have what other nations needs, so we need to wait until they come to us and tell us how much our raw material. That's also something. It's about changing the trade system, the whole system. We need to change this radically. Otherwise, we will still remain in this situation like investors coming to Africa. You cannot go to China now as investor telling Chinese, I'm coming to invest in China, because the government is in control and it doesn't need your money. But we African, all our government are broke. They don't have enough money to run the country, let alone building the country. And that put them in a very weak positions from where they accept everything. I was last in Ethiopia, one example. There is a big factory from Chinese people, exactly what you was just emphasizing. In this factory, they produce T-shirts for Nike. They make it there. So people working there, they get like the price of one T-shirt sold in America. That is their monthly salaries for one T-shirt. And every day they have to produce more than 300. But those people, when they arrive in the morning, Chinese manager, they put them all together and they raise the Chinese flag.
Really?
He go tomorrow to China and raise the Nigerian flag. They will put you in prison, to start with. So our government are very, very, very weak because of lack of funding. And we need to change the whole system. That is what we are advocating now for. We share the revenues made at the end of the value chain. That's the only way for Africa to get out of this weak position and then rebuild Africa in the way we want. Because we can hire expertise from anyone, but we need to have our own funding. And we don't need these foreign investors to come in Africa, invest the way they want, and take the profit back to their own countries. We should be the one deciding wherever you may come to Africa and invest in what, but we should be in control. So that is the big problem I see every day in Africa. Our government are too weak.
Yeah. I mean, suddenly it's not, of course, we do need investment. People need to invest massively. And not only Africans, but, foreign investors as well. But again, as you said, we just need to make sure we know what people are doing so they don't really exploit. I mean, I can't imagine, as you said, someone raising the flag of Nigeria or Ethiopia in Wuhan and bringing Chinese together around the flag. It's an aberration. Well, anyway, let's proceed with the questions. So we have another question from Ernest Magayane. I think they are from Rwanda. They ask what our leaders must do to avoid the aid from the imperialist countries which are threats to African group. I guess this question is about aid. And of course, the debate about aid has been going on for a long time. So generally, I think, would you say we've moved from aid to trade? Because that's always been the mantra from 2006 upward.
Yes.
So has that come to reality? Have we moved from aid to trade now, or are we just, deceiving ourselves?
Yeah. And who formulated this mantra? Again, the Western countries. This is our problem in Africa. We are awaiting for what other people brings in Africa. So they say now we go from aid to trade. And what is that? You take Kenya, because there's someone in the audience from Kenya. Kenya has signed a free trade agreement with the European Union. What does it mean in the practical way? So Kenya is only exporting raw material. Tea, oil, all these things are going as raw materials. So now what they have done by this trade agreement, free trade agreement called, European can bring their product because they have industry they are producing. So they will enter the East African market with their product because we are not producing anything. And they will have free access to the market without even paying any taxes to enter the market. So by signing a contract like this, the government is already losing billions. So we should tell them. I want to share just some slide with you now to showcase this story. This is what's happening in the cocoa industry. I just relate on Ghana because we are doing at this moment research with the University of Wageningen in the Netherlands. These are the outcomes. Ghana is a second producer of cocoa beans in the world. This is what's needed to make chocolate. So the oil production of Ghana arrives here in Amsterdam, in this country where I am. The Ghanaian government only get $100 million from it. The Netherlands, who only produce semi-finished product, make up $20 billion every year. And at world market level, we are talking about a value of 130 billion. So what we are advocating for, the government in Ghana should tell all these partners, we share this 130 billions. Otherwise, you don't get any cocoa from us. And then we tell it to China, and we tell it to America. The one who accept to do this, we deal with you. And this is what I mean by putting yourself in power position when you negotiate. Without this raw material, the Western countries have nothing. Sometimes I make jokes when I present these figures to people here in Europe. They tell me, yeah, but we have industry. I tell them, okay, eat your machines. And you tell me how does it feel? Without our raw materials, you have just nothing. So we need to renegotiate, and not by renegotiating the price of the cocoa beans, but a new economic system. We share the revenue made at the end of the value chain. Because without our cocoa beans, you can forget about chocolate. Yeah. Without coltan from Congo, you can forget about this internet connection we have now.
Right.
And if we apply this to all African raw materials, then we are out of poverty. That's what I wanted to share. This is the approach I have. That's what I mean with putting yourself in power position when we negotiate.
Yeah.
But it cannot happen because we are divided and Africa is not united. And that's so if you go to Ghana, Ghana says this, they will go to Ivory Coast. And Ivory Coast, we tell them, oh, welcome, brother. Come, you take whatever you want. So this is a bit our problem.
So I think those figures are staggering, first of all. And I've heard a lot of economists say that, of course, this thing exists, and the best way, because if you think about it, a lot of value has been added since the cocoa left Ghana. A lot of manpower, a lot of additions has been made to pamper the cocoa into chocolate and whatnot. So a lot of value is created externally. People have said, for us to do that, you need to create those values internally. Like rather than saying shipping 90% of your cocoa to the Netherlands, create avenues for local Ghanaian investors to build chocolate factories so that those values can be created internally. and the revenue
Yes.
can be generated internally. So that brings the question of the intentionality of the government. Of course, they are aware of that, but are they ready to make the investment corridor, good enough for Ghanaian investors to say they want to invest? Some of our colleagues actually work on business registration index in Ghana
Yes.
and elsewhere. And you'll be so amazed to see how crazy it is for someone to register a business in a country like Ghana or Nigeria or the Cote d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast. And if it's that crazy, I mean, how would people be encouraged to create a chocolate industry? Well, anyway, I still want to go to the questions because we're running out of
There are a lot
time.
of questions.
Yeah, of course. So um, let's take the first one. I think it's from Tosin Arebuwa. They're asking, what's your take on the AFCFTA in engendering economic development, considering the fact that to travel within Africa is so tough when it comes to visa issues? Massive, really important question. So we have the AFCFTA. For many people who do not know, that's like the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's like this massive intra-Africa trade framework to drive
Yes.
more trade within Africa, which is a solution to some of the things we're talking about. Well, I think Tosin is asking about the component where it has to deal with the visa, because you can't move products or produce within the continent without having ease of migration or ease of border crossing.
Exactly.
So, what's your opinion on that? I think Kenya recently led the way with the visa-free policy, but I don't know how much that translates across the continent.
Yes. Yes. And when you look at closely to this African free trade area they want to create, you discover that the US, the European Union, China are supporting it very, very good. They are praising it. And the reason why is that in 2050, Africa will be the biggest commercial market in the world, which means that they will have free access to the whole African continent to sell their products. Today, we are talking now, there is no one product Nigeria is making that can sell to the whole Africa. There is no one product from Congo made in Congo that could be sold to all Africa. So we have the free trade zone. What are we going to deal? In which value? What are we going to sell to each other? Africa will never be a power in the world by selling each other bananas. And we are opening Africa now to the all industrialized world to put their product on the African market. The consequences for this one is that we will never develop our own industries. So this is again, you are saying something very right. We have a very intelligent people. They have been studying in Europe, in America, all over the world. But what we miss as African is the feeling like, what does Africa means in the world? A lot of people in Africa don't think like that. They have like, okay, this is my country. How can we fix? So the free trade zone is fine, but when you look at behind this, it is a strategy for industrialized country to occupy the African consumer market. We should first go to another system in which we share the revenue. It doesn't matter how much value you are adding. The basic principle is that without our raw material, you cannot make this end product.
Right.
You can have sugar and other products. You will never make chocolate from sugar only. So we can have share along the whole value chain. You add something, we consider our raw material as a value. So we need to have a share in it, because without that one, you can produce nothing. Now we're talking about energy transition, to jump into the climate change story. All these countries need raw materials. They have done research in Europe, for example. They can only have 14% of this raw material in Europe. 86% is in Africa, which is exploited now by China, and then China sell it to Europe. So if we apply a new system telling them, listen, guys, this is neocolonialism. We have understood it. You get our raw materials. We share the benefit made at the end. If you don't do that, we focus on agriculture. We feed our people 3 times a day, and then we don't sell this raw material to you. They will collapse. So we are in a very powerful position when it comes to negotiation. But our politicians and our academics, our intelligentsia, they are not thinking at that level yet, because there is also something, it's very sad to say, but we still look up to European, American, Asian. We don't see our own value, our own power. So it goes beyond economy. This is something more deeper in African people. We really need to wake up.
I mean, the leaders, as you said,
combine both, no?
Yeah. I mean, you said that. I mean, you said it. The leaders are the culprits to a large extent. Yeah, I look at the history of the biggest powers since the dawn of civilization. I mean, it's often about, in many cases, about their power to negotiate trade in positions of commercial relationship that makes them, superpower to some extent. So if you have that leverage to renegotiate or reconstruct your deal with other countries, and you're not making best of it, you're gonna come out as worse off. But we have 3 more minutes and we have some questions.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah, so we have a comment from, I think, Rita Nakato, and they just was emphasizing the fact that many of these trade policies are oftentimes targeted at making things easier for foreign investors and not for domestic African indigenous investors, and we cry oftentimes when those foreign investors leave. But anyway, thanks for noting that, Rita from Uganda. But to these questions now, I'll ask you one, and I would like for you to kindly respond in 1 minute. So let's start from the one from Nancy Achu. They say, how can African countries generate investment capacity given that foreign investment is often managed by MNCs? An example of how MNCs push capital flight is how they try to subdue the cocoa agreement between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. I think that goes to your question. I guess the way we can reframe it is, so what can Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, both cocoa producers, what can they do to make sure the cocoa industry benefit both of them? I mean, as we've seen this in the way the Arab countries negotiate in terms of oil, they just go into those meetings in Doha before they come with a recommendation in terms of how much we should sell or buy crude oil. So do you think the same thing can happen with Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana in terms of cocoa? In 1 minute.
Yeah. What they should do is stop negotiating about the price of cocoa, because you will never get enough money. Secondly, brings this, what we call equal trade certification, into national trade policies. As long as we are not there, Africa will never have enough funding to promote this one industry. We need to get our money back first. This is very, very, very crucial. And the only way to do it is to incorporate it in the trade policies officially through the parliament. That's why we are mobilizing people in Africa, civil societies, young students, people in Africa, mobilize them to put the pressure on their one government, telling them what you should do is impose our vision. We don't deserve poverty. We are feeding the whole world for centuries already. It should stop. Enough is enough. So include this in the trade policy. Now what the government in Ghana and Ivory Coast are doing is again negotiating about the price. Like, we want more for the cocoa beans. So we are doing research at the downstream side of the value chain, showing them, like, look, there are people in Europe making millions from cocoa beans while they even don't know how a cocoa tree looks like. How can you accept that? So you can tell these people, when you make chocolate, we share the benefit. At least that will allow us to get enough money in the country to reinvest in our one way. Right. So this is this is exactly what we are doing even right now in Ivory Coast. We are mobilizing cocoa producers to step to the government, but our campaign is also in Europe. So we are mobilizing Europeans themselves to ask for change. Right. Because you cannot justify this. You give me 1 million and you get 400 billions. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense how many products you are putting in value addition, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that
So this is trade justice, actually, we are talking about.
yeah, isn't that the good thing about trade is now Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and say the Netherlands can negotiate about something that can improve their people's life, not about war. Trade brings, interactions that, foster economic growth rather than say, you're talking about, how can we do humanitarian relief or, military relations and whatnot. But anyway, that's the most we can take today. I'm sorry we can't take most like many of the questions and commentaries. I'll just like encourage you guys to please reach out to Max Koffi. Max, are you comfortable giving out your Twitter account or email address for people?
Yeah, please let me. Can I put in
Exactly. Yeah, please do that because many, if
chat?
not all, of our audience are young people, journalists, and people in undergrad and grad school. So it's an interesting conversation when we bring someone like you to the platform. So with that, I really want to say thank you to everyone who joined this month's edition of the webinar. And for those who might not know already, our call for application for the 2024-2025 Writing Fellowship is out and closes on April 30th. So please do apply. And Max has given his email out for those who would like to know about Africa in Motion. You can email him. Yes. And if you have questions about trade, you can also email him. So Max, thank you so much.
And I've also put the Facebook page.
Oh yeah, that would be so awesome. Yeah. Okay, that's the Facebook link too. Thank you, Max. It's such a pleasure to have you. I'm sorry that we could only have a conversation for like half an hour. I wish we could more, but thank you. We've learned a lot from this, and we hope to see you sometime again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadius.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
You too. And thanks for everyone for joining. See you next month.
Yes.